later because we don't yet have SoundCloud type stuff. So, are you ready? All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bodhana Group's Family Webinar Series, Fresh from the Tree. And today, myself, Jack Birkenstock Jr., one of your hosts, Executive Director, and one of the founders of Bodhana Group, is joined by...
The Chad. Just kidding. So this is James Kirk, and one of the therapeutic GMs with the Bodhana Group. Generally, just all around great guy, I think, from what I've heard from other people.
I've heard those things as well, yes.
You were one of those people. Tonight, we're going to talk about board games, right? Like
Yes.
Candyland and Monopoly.
No. Those of you that joined us for our first family-focused webinar were introduced to teaching and learning board games, focusing on grades K through 5. So tonight, we're going to talk somewhat similarly. We're going to cover, a lot of similar points, but we're actually going to be focusing some of our conversation tonight specifically on teenagers within teaching and learning board games, because as we're going to see, board games from the teenager perspective are a little bit kind of different. So without further ado, because there is typically much ado.
But about nothing.
Well, it's about something, hopefully. Otherwise, why would you be watching? But seriously, so here we are, fresh from the tree. Bodhana, board games, grade 6 through 12. So there we are again. Us with our lovely little pictures and our little info screens. So I have seen Ghostbusters over 375 times. I'm also a master's level clinician who's been in the human services field for about 25 years. Senor James.
I am unemployed and played jacks in the corner. So I've been playing games since RPGs specifically since I was about 6 years old. But board games obviously that whole time as well. I proclaim that Gloomhaven is life because it is. And if you've played that game, then you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't played that game, it's part of life. You should do that.
Yeah. Shame.
So what does Bodhana do? Well, we have various board game programs. You can see from the photo next to us, that's actually an event that we ran for the Tommy Foundation in Lancaster at a local game store called 6 Feet Under. We just ran board games for families, for parents and kids. One day we'll get to do that again when we can be around people. We run TTRPG groups, which is therapeutic tabletop role playing. That's one of the main things I'm involved in. I had 2 groups today, different consultations and trainings. Every year we have our big hurrah Save Against Fear, which is our not only just our one of our big fundraising opportunities, but also our chance really to highlight what we do, how we do it, kind of share our message with everybody, give everybody a great weekend with a lot of games, a variety of different RPGs and board games and things to be able to take advantage of. And then we do have a book, Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness, available on DriveThru RPG now. It is a sort of like a source book, I think is what we would call it.
Yeah, that's fair.
For TTRPG and how to make role-playing games therapeutic. We do have a second one that's going to be coming out shortly that is going to focus on board games and how to do the same thing with them, teaching skills and the like. And much more.
Now we sound like an old KTEL Records commercial, don't we?
Well, I heard that you have to say that and everybody believes it.
Oh, yes, and much, much more. So today, much like our previous webinar, we're going to be talking about teaching board games. This is going to cover anything from how to choose a game, how to, learn the game before people, and we don't mean before people roamed the earth, much like, in the dinosaur era. Fun fact, we actually did not coexist with dinosaurs, not until Jurassic Park, which was an
I
amazing
heard that.
thing. Yes. But this is before you get people to the table. So what are some best ways to learn the game? Then once you have people and you have the game set up at the table, how do you teach board games? Because it's not quite as easy as you might think. And there's some tips and tricks that we're going to give you as far as how you can approach not only learning the game for yourself, but also how to teach it to other people. We're going to kind of give a little bit of a bend on that when we talk through the teenage lens today. Also, what to do after the game. So it's not just, hey, we're done with that, let's leave all the components on the table. Nope. A lot of very valuable skills that can still be delivered even when you're just talking about picking up the pieces, putting them back into the box. And then we're going to talk here and there about different examples of appropriate games. It's one of the questions that Bodhana gets asked quite often because in addition to our regular services that we offer for therapy and skill building and such, we also run a lot of gaming rooms at conventions. We actually have an active library now that is approaching 2,000 titles, and we take these out again when we're allowed to be around people again. We take them to PTA meetings, we take them to Boy Scout, Girl Scout associations, we take them to all manner of public arenas for people to be able to learn about different games and what they can possibly bring. So we get asked often, what games are good, what games are great for my child. I have a child who's 6 years old and da 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 da, what game should I pick
Chronically
with
wets the
them?
bed.
What movie is that from? It's from a movie. I'm pretty sure it's from a movie.
Yeah, we'll talk later.
Yes, we shall. So let's start, of course, with choosing a game, because there are decisions upon decisions upon decisions. We don't know at the exact count of the number of board games that are currently available out there. If you count, board gaming is a hobby that has been in existence since, Senet is an Egyptian game that was played millennia ago. There still survive some rules. I mean, chess is a game that's been with us for absolutely forever. Catan, a game that seems as though it's been with us forever. So you have a lot of different games that you can select to play. So what are some of the considerations, James, that one needs to make when they're talking about what game do I play specifically with my teenage child?
Well, so you might have time constraints. So like length of play can be important. Most games now print that on the outside of the box, but be careful because we've also added in what we call the noob rule. This means that when you are playing with people that have never played the game before, it is going to take time to teach them how to play. It is also going to take time for them to formulate decisions, and things of that nature. So this can be longer and really is not could be it is it's going to be longer than what it says on the box. If the box says the game takes 45 to 60 minutes and you have two of the four people that are playing that have never played the game before, that game is now going to take 30 minutes long or thereabouts.
Yeah,
Right.
and in the case of more complex games, that's even more so because
Yeah.
now you're talking, first you hear the rules, then you get to see those rules in action. People have to take some time to get comfortable with those rules. So always bear that in mind when you're selecting a game. If you have 2 hours, maybe Twilight Imperium is not the game to immediately swap out to the table unless you're planning for multiple sessions over time. And much like an old school puzzle at your grandma's house, you have a table that will not get touched or trod upon by cats.
So the complexity of the game, speaking of which, another factor when you're picking the game out. Rule complexity for older kids, teenagers, things like that, is really more of just you want a game that's going to like hold their attention. Right? It's very if you start playing a game and it's like a very complex game. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces. There's 18 things to do on a turn. The people, when they're not taking their turn, are gonna be doing this.
Are you
Right. So
actually playing a game during? Oh, I'm sorry. I was.
yeah, you're
See,
playing
look,
a game while you're playing a game.
got so used to seeing it around the table.
Yeah, it's meta. Um, theme and genre. Um, get things that they're interested in. Um, there's uh, uh, there's a lot of games that are based on different intellectual properties, IPs for short. Um, if somebody is really into Star Wars, there is a dearth of Star Wars type games that are out there that are different versions of games. So there's all kinds of stuff that you can go from like heavy strategy to just like Death Star run, shoot marbles down a chute, hope you hit the spot you're looking for. Like there's all kinds of stuff that you can get for it. But kind of gaming up with the Joneses, like what's new, what's trendy, what's got that HAWT hot factor that all the kids are playing. Kids like to be up on that stuff and
Well,
and
and
playing the latest and greatest.
yeah, and I mean, it's one thing that when you start to get into the board game, I don't know, hobby obsession, depends, on what degree it goes to.
Yeah, that's
One
the
of
right.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, it says the man who's literally sitting on 2,000 plus games in his house. Uh, it's important to know that there's also, much like anyone who has ever gone into, back in the day, a Blockbuster, and unfortunately, like, your grandma, your Aunt Sarah, rented Transmorphers for you because, oh my gosh, it's the new awesome, or, whatever variation on Sharknado is being made by a third party studio. There, you are going to see within theme and genre, you're going to see various repeated game elements. One of the games that we're going to talk about in another slide, Cards Against Humanity, it came from the Apples to Apples engine, where I have a sentence with a blank, much like the match game with Gene Rayburn and Richard Dawson and whatnot, but I'm going to have my thing, and you're going to vote on which one is the best one. That formula has been recycled and rehashed so many times. Even something like Super Fight, which is an interesting game, but it basically boils down to, yeah, I thought Jerry's was cooler. Who would win in a battle between like Batman and Strawberry Shortcake? I don't know. Fight. But there's a lot of games that a mechanic will become very popular. It will start to sell, and all of a sudden, tons of different companies jump upon a way to duplicate that mechanic because it's very popular. So, doesn't mean that all those games are inherently fun, though. So, one thing that may, like, Crabs Against Humidity, which is one of the parodies of Cards Against Humanity, may not be the exact same experience. You may want to curate this a little bit more. So sometimes keeping up or gaming up with the Joneses, you want to research up as well. And we'll talk a little bit about that later on in this slide. So
Variety of skills needed just speaks to, like, games all require different skill sets to be able to play well, right? And a lot of these games are turning into cooperative experiences where everybody can kind of add their skills together, which is very cool. There also might be, like, if you have a group that you're looking to get a game together for and they all hate math, don't make a game that's really heavy in math, right? Like, pick something else that's not math heavy. Because they don't want to do math. They hate math,
yes.
Right? So don't give them things they don't like, which speaks to what do they play. Know what they're interested in. Know what types of games they think are cool. They're probably going to tell you first-person shooters, which is a video game thing. And while you can't necessarily replicate that on a board game, maybe find some games that need manual dexterity.
Yeah.
And require you to like flip things or shoot things at something on the board. There are games out there that do that. And then I want to mention real quick about reviewing reviews. When you're picking a game, and we do this more and more with stuff now. Like, what are the reviews like? What do people say about them? So be careful when you're reading reviews for a couple of different reasons. One, you want to look at the overall scoring. Don't look at particular reviews. If the first review you see is a 1-star review, but this game's been reviewed 80 times and 79 of them are 4 or 5 stars, and this one person has a 1-star review, it's probably not a terrible game. And then the other thing I want to say about it is make sure that you know kind of the target audience for what you're reading. If you're on Amazon and you're reading reviews for a game that's on Amazon, the reviews for that game, I'm not saying everything, I'm just saying, like, this is generally speaking, those reviews are more than likely going to be like general gaming public, not somebody that's like super hardcore obsessed with gaming, right? Because Amazon is a more people shop there than they would say Board Game Geek, which is a board game dedicated website that's just all the board games that you can find and all the descriptions and vital. It's like IMDb for board games, right? They have a lot of reviews on that site, but a lot of people that do reviews on that site are also hardcore board gamers. So they're going to be more selective and nitpicky about things. And they may say, like, well, this was very good, but this mechanic, man, not so much. And this was better than this one. And they might even reference games you've never heard of before, right? So just kind of be aware of the audience that people are writing for on these sites when they review games, and know the general traffic of the areas that you're looking at.
Yeah, and in general, I mean, James was talking about things like, different games, different mechanics. There are a lot of camps that exist within the board game hobby. There are people who like what they would call Euro games, and they're very much on Euro games. Now, what that means is it's not heavy on theme, but it's a game that it is a lot of skill and a lot of chaining together different mechanics, so you could win multiple ways. Typically Euro games don't have a lot of dice because that's more of a random chance to win, as opposed to now I'm winning through skill. You don't even in some of those games have a whole lot of card mechanics. Not a lot of random goes into those. It's I make moves that give me points. Those points then go into other bigger points, and that's how I win based on skill and progression. Rather, sometimes Euro fans will call most games that have a heavy influence from theme, they call them Ameritrash. So you may see certain terms like this, and sometimes it's one heck of a coded minefield when you go to look up games. And also bear in mind, there are a ton of games that are highly rated out there that I personally do not care for. That doesn't mean it's a bad game. That just means it might, maybe I personally like, give a little foreshadow. I like games that have a take that mechanic, which are games where players kind of go at each other and it's kind of, playfully mischievous. Not everyone likes that type of mechanic. So I would rate a game in that family very highly, where another person would say, well, this game really wasn't great. It wasn't good for collaborative play. And, it's not good for friends around the table. It depends on who your friends are. So be very careful when you're going in and going purely by review. One of the big things when choosing a game is if you are lucky enough to have a FLGS, a friendly local game store. Most local game stores will have an active library that you can go in and sample. You can go in and play games ahead of time. And there are a lot of patrons as well as the proprietors that will teach you these games. So get a little feel for these things. Even, bring your teen in there, encourage your teen to go there. Lots of great things when you're choosing a game. So now is one of our special teen focused topics. Theme.
Thems.
No, there's an E in there. 2 E's actually.
Right. Yes. Themies.
Memes, right? Just like all of those internet memes.
Themes.
Yes.
So themes of games. There are games out there, spoiler alert, that are going to have mature content. They are honestly not as well marked as they are with like video games or other things that are heavily policed. you know, as far as their content. They don't have the advisory stickers on board games. A game like epic, you know, spell battles of the Battle Wizards duel at Mount Skull's Fire. That's a very heavily mature content game.
Yes.
There are sexual references. There's foul language. The artwork is I'm not even going to say suggestive.
It's quite directive.
It's not meant to be played by a grade 12.
Yeah.
You know, so it's going to take a little more work to find out if the games that they're interested in are games that are appropriate for them. And because there is not an outward rating system, that's where you kind of have to fall back on what we were just talking about with kind of doing your research ahead of time. You know, if people are interested in a game, there are ways to navigate these things. You know, but there's plenty of horror games out there. There's loads of games that have some sort of violence. You know, Kill the Thing. There you go.
Yeah, and even when we're talking about things like sexuality and horror and violence, I mean, we're not saying that, you know, like it's a Playboy game, or actually, if you go back to like the 1960s and 70s, there are a lot of quote unquote, you know, like risque couples games, or it's like, you know, Love Dice and, you know, things like this.
Operation.
Hey, that's the Goofy game for dopey doctors. But that guy under that sheet, he was naked. That is true, James. But when we talk about a lot of this, you know, bear in mind that, you know, we're not talking about things that are necessarily bold, in your face graphic, you know, that you look at this. But let's examine, for example, there's a game out that's called Fog of Love. And Fog of Love is a game that one could argue features mature content because it's a game that talks about relationships and intimacy. Now, maybe you as a parent do not yet feel your son or daughter, or either, is ready for that conversation yet. Maybe you don't, you know, maybe you didn't have that conversation. Maybe you're talking about a younger teenager. Maybe you're talking about a teenager who maybe for whatever reason is questioning a lot of these things. You want to always be careful about, you know, this is not a game that was designed with your child in mind. It is a game that was designed with selling the game in mind. So if part of the game hinges upon some of that content, there may be more risque elements in it. In terms of mature content, one of the games that James and I really appreciate is a game called Dead of Winter. And the whole thrust of Dead of Winter is you're in a town. The town has been infested by zombies. It's the dead of winter, so you risk frostbite, getting bit, all manner of horror. But the game uses something called the crossroads system. And it basically provides you with moral quandaries. You know, do you feed the people that are knocking on the front door of your little sanctuary, you know, or do you let them starve? Or, you know, do you rescue the older person or the younger person? You know, all of these deep emotional underpinnings, which could be great conversation. Maybe you have not explored a lot of that with your child yet.
And it also really, you know, it drives that horror component home, because all of the decisions in that game, one of the reasons that Jack and I like it so much is that's a game where your decisions are actually weighty decisions. Like, they matter. Your resources are scarce, and a bad move like could cost you the game. You know, so it's tough, but it's also, you know, with the horror component, it also has a lot of tension in it, and that can be stressful for people that are not used to having that type of tension in a game. You know, it's good tension, builds character, puts hair on your bones or on your chest.
How do you shave the hair off your bones? That's a tricky maneuver.
Well, you don't.
That is true.
Cards Against Humanity, Joking Hazard. These are games that I don't have a better term for. It's potty humor. It's Mad Lib, Beavis and Butthead. So it creates comedy by basically utilizing shock value.
Yeah.
It,
It
like come
creates
up with
awkward
the
moments.
worst, most outlandish thing that you can possibly come up with, or something that's like outside of the game would be horribly offensive that you would never say to people. But you're playing a game, so play the game.
Yeah.
And like we said, this has been copied all over the place. Some games like that Epic Spell Wizards that I mentioned earlier, you could take a look at the box art and have a pretty good idea. I don't think that my 12-year-old should play this, or my 14-year-old should play this. But some of it does, some of the box art and some of the graphic presentation on games can give you a clue that there's mature content in it. You can also completely misjudge it. You can see a game like Horrified, that you see the word horrified and it has classic monsters on it, like Frankenstein and Dracula and everything like that. And you're like, oh, that's a horror game. That's scary. We don't want to play that. It's actually really not scary.
No, not at all.
It uses the subject material of the classic monsters, but it does it in a very non-horrifying manner and just makes it a fun strategy game. So you can't go just by the box art and graphics, book by its cover. Okay. Still holds true.
Yeah.
But you do want to do your research and make sure that you know what kind of content is in these games.
Yeah, I mean, because specifically, if you're talking about Cards Against Humanity, and again, the reason that we mentioned that one specifically, it's a very, cross-popular game, but when you get down to it, it's one of those games that very clearly is not for everyone because, when we say about potty humor, there are cards and there are expansions that are racist, homophobic, transphobic. I mean, there's a lot of elements within that again, you may not want your child engaging that. And I know what you say, well, if I don't buy it for my kid, then they're not going to have it. They're not going to play it. Well, let's get very genuine here. If it is verboten, if it is forbidden, typically a teenager is going to find their way to find it. And this goes all the way back to, kids reading dirty limericks and, like explicit lithographs going all the way up to like kids in the 30s listening to Mom's Mabley records and, me in the 80s, stealing my buddy's copy of the Eddie Murphy cassette, so I could listen to Delirious or Comedian, in my room and snicker when it's played really low. Every generation has this silent form of rebellion. And a lot of these games, because they push on taboo topics, and Joking Hazard is based off the very popular Cyanide Happiness cartoon series. Again, very adult, mature themes, some of them involving, a lot of very highly inappropriate, in some cases suggested illegal activity, but it's a comic strip. It looks like a cartoon. So it doesn't look troublesome. So another thing is try to be aware of what's out there just to know what kind of conversations that you want to have with your teenager about these,
And I will say, like, for games like Cards Against Humanity, they make no secret about what's in there, right? Like, they're not trying to hide it from you. The names of the expansions and things, like, they will tell you exactly what is in that box.
Yeah.
Right. So they're not making the game because like they're necessarily like looking to just incorporate a society of terrible people, right? But this is a game for people that have a different style of humor, and they are upfront, about what is in this game. There's nothing surprising about this as long as you've done like a basic read up on what's in the game. So I just, to their credit, it's not like they're creating this game that's like secretly the most offensive thing ever. Like they are very much just saying like Cards Against Humanity, this is not for kids,
right.
So and we mentioned intellectual properties. There's going to be Firefly has a strategic board game and a dice game and like 6 different Firefly games, a deck builder.
Oh yeah.
And that show had 1 season, right? Like there's
not even a full season.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of properties out there. If your kids are into Harry Potter, you got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's all kinds of things out there. Now, I will caution you with intellectual properties. just like with video games or any other type of like emulated thing, there are some absolute gems and there is some trash. Okay. So the trick really here is, again, do some research. When it comes to intellectual properties, people are unabashedly opinionated about their favorite things. Right? If somebody made a Star Wars game and you asked a Star Wars fan how that game was, and that game was crap, no problem telling you that it was crap.
Oh, they'll put it in the review headline.
Right. But again, aggregate, take the whole picture, don't take one or two people's opinions. And really like try to seek out some of the better games that match play styles for the people that you want to, you want to teach or you want to play with.
Yeah.
And representation is another thing that's become more important than it was even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Heck, representation, what we mean is how are there representations of minorities, LGBTQ, that sort of, those sorts of subjects.
And the big concern with this area is, as a parent, we have certain feelings about what is, appropriate or correct, but we are not in your home. We cannot tell you what to teach. And, that's not the goal of this presentation. The
Right.
goal of this presentation is for you to be aware that there are some games that speak more directly towards representation. There are other games that do not speak well or favorably towards representation. So if you're a parent that believes in a certain philosophy, if the game hints towards, we talked about sexuality, we're not just talking about the mechanics of sex. We're not talking about just straight intercourse. With sexuality, we're talking about the concept of intimacy. And the concept of intimacy to some people is man and a woman. To others, it is a woman and a woman, or a man and a man. So that concept may come up in terms of representation in that game's property. So just be aware that that is something that might be problematic in one of two ways. And it may also depend, just maybe your child is younger in the teenage years. You haven't had that conversation yet. Well, the game might prompt that conversation. So just consider and know, specifically with themes, it's a really heavy area, because usually with kids games, like we talked a little bit about intellectual property in our previous training, because for the most part, intellectual property in younger kids games is you have a SpongeBob skin of Monopoly and Yahtzee and Parcheesi, and so you have like an Operation skin of almost every different IP or whatever that's out there. Here we're talking about, like James said, dice games, board games, social deduction games, clue giving games. Like there's a whole bunch of different titles, strategy games that use different intellectual properties. Back to the Future is another one. They have like 7 different games for a 30-year-old franchise, just came out within the last like 2 to 3 years. So be aware of what's out there before you bring it to the table, because there might be conversations that this material is going to prompt, and you can't always prevent those conversations from happening. Knowledge is out there. So you've gotten the game home, a little bit of a guide of what's going to be in that box. What are some of the things you have to contend with?
Pain.
But why pain, James? What's in the box?
So board game comes with a board, likely, or a playmat, some type of surface that forms the boundaries of the area that the game is being played on. Inside the box, you will probably, and these are, like, again, generally speaking, most every board game does this. You'll find like tokens or pawns or something that we call meeples, which are just little like wooden blobby nebulous figures that have their arms and their legs out like this,
Stands
and then
for my people.
Yep. But these are usually the pieces that are used to represent the players on said board. whatever that might be. Games come with some kind of a resolution mechanic, some way for you to be able to know, did I succeed at what I was doing? Most often this is done with either dice or cards. It'll one of the two. There's a rule book. That's important because it has the stuff in it for how to play the game. Something we refer to as, quote, fiddly bits. Some games do not have a lot of, no, we are not, no. This,
Not Charlie
going down to
Daniels?
Georgia. We're not,
Okay, gotcha.
no fiddle contest. Fiddly bits refer to all of the pieces. For example, in a game of Sorry, classic game, there's a board, there's cards, and there's pawns and dice. That's it.
Yeah.
So there's no fiddly
not very
bits.
fiddly.
No, there's really no fiddly bits. Monopoly comes with your pieces to move around the board and cards, but then it also comes with stacks of money.
In different denomination, mind you.
Green house tokens, red hotel tokens. So there's a couple of extra things to keep track of. Any game that adds tokens or components for you to like extra things to mark during the game, we refer to those as fiddly bits. Yeah. Just the smaller or extra components. Some games will come with a player aid or some type of little like card or a sheet that says on your turn, a player can do this. Here are the basic rules of the game. This is a quick reference in case you have questions about the terminology during the game. Some games come with this, some games don't. And that's okay. Games that don't, their choice, they're totally allowed to be wrong. They don't have to. But
actually, gold star award goes to Villainous for not only having player aids, but it's your victory guide for you to know how to win the game.
Yeah, Villainous gives, depending on the villain that you're playing, each villain gets a playbook.
Yeah.
That not only tells you like what the other players are trying to do to win, but then also tells you, here's how you win, and here are some of the cards that you need to make sure come out of that deck for you to do this as quickly as possible. And here's how to find those cards or how to manipulate the game to be able to get it to your advantage. It's very cool. And then most of the rule books in the beginning usually have some kind of setup guide. They'll tell you, if this is your first game, set it up like this, and they have a picture and everything's labeled. You know, there's a lot more games that are doing that nowadays. But these are the types of things that you'll find in the box when you pop that sucker open. So the unboxing, which
sounds so ceremonious,
right? This is your inventory control. This is where you're going through and making sure that everything to play the game is there. There's going to be nothing more frustrating than finally getting people to sit down at a table, play the game, and find out that you don't have all of the pieces that you need. I don't have another way to say it. It sucks. Right? Don't get in that position. Once you have everything out of the box and you're familiar with the components, consult the manual, read the rule book. Now, you don't just have to read the rule book. There are other ways to learn how to play the game. The YouTubes, and honestly, even the game designers themselves, some of them just have like a link or a QR code that you can scan, and it'll take you to a video that teaches you how to play the game. Be careful when you are selecting videos online, because some of the videos, it sounds good, they are labeled Let's Play. Okay, or they will be called a Let's Play video. A Let's Play video is not an instructional video. You can learn, but a Let's Play video is really a video taken of people actually playing the game. They don't take a lot of time to explain a lot of the rules and things like that. Their assumption is that you know how to play the game. You're just watching people play it to learn advanced strategy maybe, or just get something different out of it. So you want to look for tutorials or videos that say how to play said game. And And if the company provides you with a link, that's perfect. Go to that.
Yeah.
That'll probably be the best way to do it. And that's using other resources. You know, there's besides just reading the rule book, because some people can't do that.
Yeah.
Some people can't like just sit down and read, you know, a 30-page rule book and be like, all right, ready to go. May have to look a couple things up, but I got most of it.
And even a lot of those resources that we mentioned earlier, like one of the benefits of Board Game Geek is, I mean, a couple of things that it does as far as learning the game. They'll give you pictures of what the components look like. They'll give you a rough overview of the rules, but then they also have links to many review videos, as well as another section that is called errata, which is ERRATA. And errata is basically, hey, you know, much like in the video game world where they'll have like patch notes and like patches that come out after the game, there are various times where people will find an element of a game that does not work as well as intended. Or, hey, I found that this card in this combination kind of breaks the game, quote unquote. So they'll have a lot of those rules changes and updates. Happens with any other sort of design. So when we say about Board Game Geek being a great resource, it will get written reviews, it will get video reviews. Some people have actually created player guides, like we mentioned on the slide previously, that you can download to print out for your players at your table. It's also a great resource in case you ever buy a used game somewhere, like if you go to a Goodwill or a consignment store and you buy a game that doesn't happen to have the rulebook anymore. Sometimes the company even will put up a PDF that you can print and download of the actual rulebook itself. So great other resources that are out there.
At some point, put cap A into slot B, assemble the game. Put it together the way you should put it together before you play the game. And then while it's together, play a couple turns. You know, just by yourself, maybe controlling a couple of players so you can see some basic interactions. Get used to the flow of a turn because you're going to be teaching other people how to do this. And if you're not sure, they're definitely not going to be sure. And then this seems like such a duh type of thing. Put the game away. The reason we do this, and I mentioned this in our other webinar because it's just so true. If you own a copy of Fireball Island, Revenge of Volcar from Restoration Games,
Great game.
Beautiful. It is a beautiful remake of Fireball Island. I love it. When you go to put it away, it does not go in the box the same way it came. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It is a nuance to figure out how to put everything in there away. You should know that so that when you go to put it away when you're done playing with other people and they offer to help, that you can tell them what needs to happen. There are a couple of games that come with maps that tell you how to put everything away. Those are exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's also a lot of games. I know that Grim Forest, for example, is a game that actually comes with dishes for the components that have like lids over top of them so your pieces don't spill out. And the way that it fits in, you know, is definitely very well engineered so that the box closes flat, which is kind of what James is alluding to with Fireball Island, that you always get like that little bulge, or even if you get expansions for certain board games, they don't always compensate for that in the original box design. They didn't know they'd have like 8 expansions for this game later on down the road. So that's why even some companies come out with larger storages, you know, bigger boxes. And Red Dragon Inn is a great one that contains like every single version and all the characters. It contains of like 35 different characters. So it's a different box as you get more of these. But knowing how to put your game away just helps you be able to play it more easily and readily the next time, which might include people.
Uh-oh. Teaching players. All right, so you have your people there. Everybody's there. You're ready to play. Dude.
What
do I do? Right? So regardless of how somebody retains information or how they learn, there is a little bit of nuance to teaching a game. You need to start with the goal. If you don't start with the object of the game is everything that you say before you say the object of the game is, they will not remember. Because teens want to win. Right? They're going to be thinking about, okay, that's great, but what do I need to do? Okay, that's great, but how do I win? Okay, that's great, but what does this mean? Right? So start with the goal. There needs to be a clear progression for how the game, how the game flows to the end. How do I get to my goal? What do I need to do, to be able to be the winner? They also should know, is the game cooperative or competitive? Games were almost strictly competitive for a very long time.
Yeah.
And then somewhere, I don't even know when the shift really started. I'd have to go back and actually do research. There are tons of cooperative games now. Games that are designed so that the game itself, the rules of the game, run the game. And the people playing it are competing against the game itself. Right? It's pretty outstanding. There are some games where you work together, but then the person that had the highest score among all of your players is the big winner. We call those co-op competitive because they are co-op games, but they have a competitive element to them. They should know whether it's cooperative or competitive because they need to know like how to think. Am I thinking against other people or am I working with everybody at the table to reach my goal? Once you have a clear goal and you have a progression of how to get there, now we can talk a little bit about turn anatomy, basic tactics of the game. It is really, really important that you not bog players down with a whole bunch of details. Tell them what they need to know to play the game. Tell them what they need to know for a turn. Tell them the things that they can do on the turn. If there's multiple things they can do on a turn, very likely the game came with a player aid. If it didn't,
Hopefully.
you might want to think about making one.
Yeah.
Before the game starts so that your players have something there that they can reference. You also want to talk about any important variables. By the way, when you're taking your turn, this thing over here is the horror meter. And every turn, this goes up 1 click. But if you do these things, it goes up more clicks. And when the horror meter gets to 10, and if we haven't found the ghost, then the game's over. Right? So they're going to need to know if there are any like large barriers that are in the way. You're not going to be able to cover every little bit of nuance. I usually like to cover the big things and then tell them, obviously we're learning as we go. If something comes up that I didn't cover or that I forgot to mention, I'll stop the game. We'll talk about it. And if we need to, change things for the way that we're playing for this specific game because we're learning, we can do that.
Yeah.
Okay? I always put that disclaimer in there.
Yeah, and it's kind of a side connection to this, and I don't know if this is a strategy or just good advice, but if you are the person that is teaching the game and you know the game, one kind of little good neighbor ambassador rule to bring more people into the hobby, don't be a cutthroat teacher. Don't, yes, you know the game. You could probably trounce people because you have knowledge the other players do not, but that's not always a good way to introduce someone to something. Play competitively, play normally, but maybe even during that learning game experience. And this, again, season to your game's delight and your gamer group's delight, but we often do like it's the learning version of this game. So we're going to talk through and we'll even say, oh, dude, maybe you should have done this on your turn instead because that would have been a better move for you. So you're literally teaching people while they're playing the game as opposed to here's some basic stuff. I don't even know what I'm doing yet. And at the end of the game, I have 12 points and you have 500. I'm not going to be very motivated to play that game again. Maybe I'm not even motivated to play it with you. So it's even good table culture just to bear in mind. Don't be a cutthroat teacher.
Yeah. That's a great point. And then make sure that they know that the complications to their goal, complications are usually either player driven, which happens mostly in a competitive game. The other players are actively going to be stopping you. Can also happen cooperatively where players just make decisions and go off, on a tear. And dude, we didn't talk about this, or Complications can be game/RNG, random number generator driven. I refer to RNG as like just the random happenstance, like rolling dice. I'm crap at dice games because I can't roll the dice good.
Unless it's
But
a role-playing game.
unless it's an RPG, and then my dice are fantastic. But the game itself might be creating the obstacles that the players have to overcome. That can come either competitive or cooperative. Either one. But yeah, that kind of sums up there when you're teaching players. Most important thing, if you remember nothing else, start with the object of the game and then go from there.
Absolutely. So here are some challenges, and we're going to try to make these a little bit more kind of adolescent focused. Some of these definitely get back to our previous presentation, but one of the first ones we talk about is teen awkward. And what we're talking about here is to bring a little bit of the, psychology and all this in. A very big aspect of adolescence is identity versus role confusion, and that seek for identity. This is where we talk about anything from, peer pressure and social groups and cliques, which are a very natural format of us being social animals as people. It's also a very natural thing for kids to rebel. There's just a ton of awkward, whether we're talking about puberty or whether we're talking about just knowing who you are and exploring who you want to be or don't want to be. A lot of that stuff might be present around the table. So, whereas family game night may have been kind of more of an everybody thing, as we get into kind of teenage years, it might be more of a me hanging out with my friends kind of thing. That's normal. For a large degree, because you that's part of adolescence, is exploring our identity within a social structure. It requires a little bit of rebellion. It actually kind of prepares us to leave the nest, so to speak, which sallying forth into adulthood. So that awkward is okay. And sometimes that awkward could even be with the game selection that we talk about. I remember very well intending, a lot of my relatives would buy me games that they read about that were great. And I would kind of look at them and go, that's a kid's game. Why'd you give me a kid's game? But you like G.I. Joe. When I was 12, it's a lovely gift, though, because I don't want to get smacked in the back of the head by my 70s parents. So just bear in mind, a lot of things developmentally are going on in the mind of a teenager. And a lot of those things might affect social engagement and social interaction. What did they used to joke around that, and what was the old joke, James, in Christian baseball categories is second base? Like that was one of the old jokes that they talked about because it's a social game, and a lot of the clues, like people would do like double entendre clues, and people would kind of, use that as like one of those kind of awkward ways to flirt, or to, so you might like mess up a die roll, or you might like attack another player more than another, because it's kind of the board game equivalent of dipping someone's pigtails into an inkwell.
Pull their hair because that means I like them.
Right.
Yeah.
Very weirdness, very awkward. So you might see a lot of these things kind of emerge in board game play. These could be challenges to the games that you choose. These can also be challenges to the way that people play, because just as much as you might have an awkward flirt at the table, you might also have a person that is just, I'm down to game, so I don't want anybody like hitting on me while we're playing. I'm here to win. That's why I brought Twilight Imperium. Everyone has a reason to play. So know that reason when you do that approach. James, you do great on the type of learner style.
So everybody learns differently here. But based on how they learn, like you kind of want to know ahead of time how people retain information. It's entirely possible that you have somebody that has my mutant power, which is my ability to just pick up a rule book, read it, and be like, all right, I'm good to go. They learn by reading. Like they assimilate that information by just reading it. There are people that learn visually. So diagrams inside of a rule book, or like sometimes the rules will draw examples of how it works. you can also use the board and the setup of the game to kind of give visual examples to people so that they can see how it plays out. And then there are some people that need to be hands-on, the doer. And you can tell they're the ones that are like, they're itchy, they're raring to go. They're sitting at the table and they're like, okay, can we just get at it? Can we just get at it? Like I'll be able to pick this up once we start playing. I just need to start playing and then I'll get it. Coincidentally, also the people that get the most frustrated when they don't get it after you start playing, because it's the way that they learn, right? So
Trade secret.
know and be responsive to all of those types of learners, because you're going to get different ones at the table. It's very rare that you're going to get a group of people that just all learn the same way.
Yeah.
Right? Like everybody retains information differently. Jack, talk to us about personalities.
Well, again, it's kind of a vestige just to kind of double, put a further nail into that topic about, just what we're talking about with teens and adolescents. The whole idea of personalities, we're all exploring identity. These personalities are going to sometimes seem very much larger than life. A lot of times, again, with different emotions, different things going on chemically in the body. We might have a lose is much larger than normal, or an off-color joke like really kind of takes away and kind of sits with that person for a very long amount of time. There's also a lot to be said about personalities of just gamers, that there are people who play for, like I said a little bit earlier, different reasons. Some people play to win, some people play to learn, some people play to hang out, some people play because they're at their friend's house and that's what they're doing. They don't really like gaming. So it takes all kinds to make a table. And part of having the games available for those folks, and even part of the group, if you're a teen yourself and you're part of a gamer group, know the people you're at the table with. James loves deep strategy games. Not that he doesn't enjoy funsies games. I want to play as many games as I can get my fingers on. So I'm like, ooh, Brady Bunch game. Let's try that. And James like, fine. Can we play a real game soon? And I know James is messing with me. But different types of personalities, different types of gamers. I also am not a very competitive gamer. I could care less whether I win or lose. Some people think that's cool because they can beat me very easily and then I'm no challenge. Other people that bothers because well, don't you care? Not really. It's a game. It doesn't change my rent. It doesn't, I don't win a copy of the game if I beat you in my own dining room with it. So I already have the game at that point. But the point is, know the personalities of the people around the table and what motivates them to join you at the table. It will enrich and enhance the gaming experience, because also, if you're not paying attention to those personalities, it can bring some conflict to your table. So, speaking of one of my favorite sources of conflict around the table, tech. This is something we talk about a lot in the RPG realm as well. In addition to the board game, is the whole idea of tech interruptions. We didn't talk about this quite so much for the children's section, K through 5, because not a lot of kids through that age group necessarily have cell phones. But cell phones, tablets, I mean, it used to be before, you had to go take a phone call of a ridiculously 3-mile long phone cord. Now you have
What?
cell phones.
What?
Sorry, skip, huh?
What?
So are you giving me a tech interruption? Yeah. Bear in mind, we are living in a more advanced technological age, and tech in the board game realm is one of these things that gets discussed quite heavily, whether you have games around the table, whether to not have phones around the table when you're gaming. And really the answer is it's kind of up to your group. Because sometimes, and one of the tricks that a lot of companies are going into, and a lot of what we're learning about the hobby is, there are games that use technology at the table. Games like Stop Thief, Clank in Space. There's a ton of scoring apps out there for different games. Tech doesn't necessarily have to be a problem, but in a lot of ways it can, because it holds up the game when you
There
have
are
interruption.
games that are entirely run by an app.
Absolutely.
Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle Earth, or Mansions of Madness
Yes.
have apps that run the entire game. Actually, Imperial Assault has that as well.
Yeah, that is true.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So here's some of the aids or strategies. We've talked about a couple of these so far, so we're not going to spend too terribly much time on them. But number one, player aids and turn sheets. People knowing what they do on a turn does so many different things. It makes the game smoother. It also makes sure that your copy of the rulebook doesn't turn into a dog-eared mess of rips, tears, and bends inside of your first night of play. Because anytime that there's like a question or something, oh my gosh, consult the rules, consult the rules. What can I do on my turn? Again, games that have those, a lot of people have been getting savvy about developing those. Board Game Geek, absolutely one of your best helps in this regard.
Yeah, games that are larger that have a lot of pieces, really good idea to have like dividers or sorters of some type, even like baggies. Just like, these tokens go in this bag, these tokens go in this bag, these tokens go in this bag. You have all the pieces sorted, so that way it's much easier to get the game out, and then like to put the game away, everything becomes more organized. It's not just dump 80 tokens in a box, we'll figure it out next time we play. In that vein, make sure that everybody has a job. There is a level of engagement that comes with, I am responsible for this aspect of the game, because it subconsciously says, I am responsible for this part of everybody's fun. And I don't want to be the person that dropped the ball on fun because it wasn't doing my job. Right. So somebody's the banker. They hold all of the money tokens. Somebody has all of the little health markers and chits that when things take damage, you hand out the damage tokens. Somebody has status effect markers like, oh, you're immobilized now. Here, have an arrow foot. Like there's different things that people can take on to give them a role to keep them immersed in the game. Also, they can then put their specific part of the game away and everybody shares in that. Ground rules. Get you some. You should really these are not game rules. These are not things that are in the instruction book. These are, when you're at my table, here's how we game in the Kirk house. You know what I mean? Or here's how we game in the Birkenstock house. Everybody plays, until they give you a reason not to. Right? So it doesn't mean like you have to play. It just means that everybody is able to play and invited to play. So set some ground rules on how things roll. How, if you have any rules about stuff in your home that you need people to know about before you start playing games.
Well, and like, again, borrowing something from a lot of the RPG talk that we have, we had talked a lot in our recent Save Against Fear, and there's a bunch of our content available on our YouTube channel for this, but we talk a lot about consenting gaming. Please bear in mind, consent around the table is not something that's just for an RPG session. You can still have rules around the table about, certain conversations that are okay or not okay to have, or maybe certain games that dwell on themes that maybe you're comfortable or uncomfortable having that you would not like at your table. Consent is important to gaming because it makes sure that everybody plays. And that's just another one of those very, very important ground rules. So the next point is a little different from before, where I said small talk is great. Normally at a table, we talk about, small talk kind of, getting everybody off track. And again, this might be a ground rule, but just bear in mind, a lot of times from an adolescent development standpoint, and I remember this from my own, when I used to play a lot of board games, back before I became serious in the hobby, I wasn't playing the game to learn the game. I was playing the game to hang out with people. I was playing the game as a way to develop. I mean, this is one of these great things. And we talk about this a lot with a lot of the board game groups that we do. You know, the Tommy Foundation that James mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, they're a local agency in Lancaster, PA, and they support individuals and families who experience autism. So, our whole thrust of doing these monthly board game outings was it's not like a formal group where we all sit around and go, today we're going to practice meeting new people. So everyone go pick a new game. No, no. We're going to play board games because they bring up natural opportunities for people to socialize and engage with each other, or, you know, maybe be challenged when there's a rule discrepancy or dealing with conflict over a rules discrepancy. So small talk as a way to help with social engagement. That's one of the main reasons we game together. Recreation as play is part of our development. So small talk around the table is great for adolescents because, I mean, it's great for everybody really, but in terms of it being a social engagement, that's a table discussion. Okay, we've talked enough about this. Can we get back to the game? It's perfectly fine. Sir.
Um, while you're playing the game, this is a very important thing that like my dad had to learn when he was teaching me, and I've had to learn while I'm teaching other people. There's a line between teaching somebody how to play the game and then playing the game for them when they don't really know what they're doing, right? It's okay occasionally if you want to give an example of how something's supposed to be done. Like the first time you come upon a thing, give an example of it. Or you can even tell them, so if you make this move, here's what's going to happen, just so you're aware, right? That very occasionally that's okay. But really, for the most part, like, they're there to play the game. Okay, so give them choices, let them make decisions, and let like them decide if they lost the game, they should lose the game because they made the decisions, not because you played for them and put them in a position to lose.
Right.
That will breed resentment. Right? They will remember that you were the person that told them to do those things and then they didn't win the game, and they're not really going to want to play with you. If they had a good experience and they were given the opportunity to kind of play the game and feel along and fumble for themselves, they're smart. They'll pick it up. You know, so just make sure that you're playing with them and not playing for them.
Yeah, I've sat at tables. You probably have too, James, where literally it could be like, "Hey, I'm going to just go away for an hour or two. You just go ahead and play everybody's turn." The person seemed more than amply, ripe to do that, and I was like, "That, yeah, it's not really fun." I mean, it shows mastery over the game, but it's yeah. So, cell phone apps, kind of the last part here, and sometimes cell phone apps, whether it's a counting app, whether it's one of those, everybody put your finger on the phone and the phone will decide who goes first app. That's a very cool app that you can download. One of the other things that I wanted to kind of make mention is there are also a lot of what they call TTS or tabletop simulators available. That is another avenue of tech. Some of them can actually be good ways to learn the game. One in particular that I know James and I are kind of enamored of is one called Board Game Arena. And the thing about Board Game Arena that is nice, and again, I'm not saying it's, others are not good. I prefer Board Game Arena because it actually has the game scripted so that I just basically press play. It sets it up and it guides me through the experience of learning and what my turn is. I've actually learned Takanodo, Tokaido. Like there's a ton of board games that I've learned on this website just by playing them. Whereas a lot of tabletop simulators, they are designed for people who have good mastery over a game. That it's kind of, here's a box of components, they're on the table. You will pick up and move each piece because you know this game so well. So when we're talking about like tabletop simulator or Tabletopia, a lot of these, bear in mind, they are very engaging. They can be somewhat costly at times as well because you have the basic cost for the package plus each game in some cases cost an additional amount. Tabletop Arena or Board Game Arena. That one is one cost per month, and you get a ton of games that you can play. So don't just take my word telling you what I prefer, but explore tabletop simulators. It's another great way also to be able to game with people that you normally can't see, provided everybody has the same tech, especially right now within the pandemic. It's a great way to game with people that you can't get together with at the moment. Also, maybe a great way to get in touch with people that you don't get to see normally, old buddies from high school or college, something of that sort. Technology is not the enemy of board gaming. It's something that we're learning to work very much hand in hand, very in tandem with. And again, one of our opinions, but we love bringing people together, especially if it's over a table. Senior James, I think we only have after the game.
Yeah. This is the, let players know, like, that was really great. You did this really well. Do it during the game. That was a great move. Be complimentary. You want people to play games with you. You want them to enjoy playing games, right? And then just offer thoughts on improving gameplay. Newer players, without sounding haughty about it, you could say, hey, so remember that rule that we talked about, that said every third space is lava. So if you had spent a point and moved one more space, you wouldn't have been caught in the lava. So just remember that next time. Just pointing out areas where, the next time we play, you want to remember this stuff. Share your knowledge. You want to, if you win, if I win a game, I want to know that I was going up against the best version of the people that I was playing against all the time. So build them up. Don't make them feel like they're dumb. Don't make them feel like they're not good at it, because that does not foster continued playing and family game nights, and they'll want to do other stuff.
Yeah.
Find out what they liked and what they didn't like, and just like be honest about it. Like, guys, was this fun? Seriously, if it wasn't fun, we can try something different. Seemed like everybody was having a good time. What did you enjoy about it? What didn't you enjoy about it? There's a game that's like this, but has none of the things that you hate. Let's try that one next time. Speaking of next time, set up when you're gonna have a next time. Make that plan. You know why? Because people like to look forward to things. I like to look forward to things. I get excited about stuff, but give them a time when you're going to play next. They know that you're invested. It will make them invested. If they know that time is coming up and they enjoyed themselves, they'll make time for it. But make sure you guys solidify that while you're still at the table. And they're still on that, oh, yeah, it was really fun. That was really cool. Because if you ask them like a day later, they're going to be like, no, man, I don't have time for that. It's not cool. And they're going to go back to being whatever, like, parent ignoring machine they turned into. You can give some options for the next thing to try, or the next game. Like I just said, like maybe they enjoyed some stuff about the game. There are a couple of mechanics they didn't like. You might be aware of a game that is similar but doesn't have the things that they hated in it. Suggest that. You could suggest completely different off the wall things. If you're not really familiar with specific board games, ask about genres of board games. Do you guys want to try a deck builder out? Do you guys want to try this resource management thing that's based on the blacklist, or whatever, whatever the case might be. Super important after the game, put away the game together. Everybody gets into the habit that when they play a game, they're also responsible for helping to clean it up, right? Because there way too many times I've played board games with people where they're like, all right, great game, thanks, man. You get a pat on the back, and then they're gone. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'll clean up 800 pieces or whatever this was, But if they put it away with you, remember earlier when you put the game away and figured out how to put everything in the box? This is where you can teach them the same thing. So that way the game gets put away correctly and everybody knows how stuff is supposed to go in the box.
So in general, thank you for everyone who has watched. If you enjoy this wonderful little series, I will say that we will announce some of the up and comers in just a moment here. But if you would like more information about the Bodhana Group and what it is we offer, here is our website, www.thebodhanagroup.org. You can email us at thebodhanagroup@gmail.com, or check out the Bodhana Group on Facebook, where we have a bunch of wonderful announcements and a lot of our local programming. We are at the Bodhana Group on Twitter. Search us on the web for Save Against Fear. Again, our annual gaming convention was run virtually this year due to COVID, but we are hoping to be back in a person next year. And you can go to Drive-Thru RPG to order Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness. We are going to have our upcoming board game Wizards, Warriors, and Wellness, as James referenced earlier, which is going to basically be a blue cover. So you'll be able to very easily spot it, hopefully at other places to pick up the volume. So that is Bodhana's family shout out video this week to teach you all about board games. But next week, James and I will be joining you for a segment that is role-playing game focused, that is all about introducing new players to the table. We talk about it purely from a recreational, but also mostly from a therapeutic context about how to introduce people to your table, to your story, and your game. So
Group dynamics. Don't make it weird, Reggie.
And then in the future, we have a lot of great content that is going to be coming up. Go to our main website under the Book Now tab that you're going to find on our website, and then we'll tell you how to find all the wonderful content that we have launching, as well as if you missed a past video. We do ask, if you enjoy what you see and you like it, please consider donating to us. It helps keep the machine running. And I would say, other than that, just looking down the road, we are looking in the future, having some special guest designers to join us on some of these episodes.
Gonna be fun.
Yes, we've just secured one of our personal favorites, Mr. Coke Covert from Smirk and Dagger / Smirk and Laughter Games, who's going to be talking to us all about Take That mechanics and the psychology behind those, and why we love to play games where, you got to get to getting in good before the getting. I totally ruined that, didn't I, James?
Speaking of getting, we should get going.
We probably
because I
should.
feel like Jack is going to break down soon. So
I'll start to
I have been and continue to be James Kirk, therapeutic GM for the Bodhana Group, as one of your hosts this evening. And
I am and always will be your friend, Jack Birkenstock Jr., Executive Director and one of the founders of Bodhana. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you very soon at the next webinar.